One thing I have realized over the last several years is that if you're ever out with a group of friends or your family or whatever kind of cluster of people you're with, there's pretty much always one person who is in charge of the photography for that group, right? Like they're the person who, no matter where you are, they're gonna grab their phone and snap a selfie or make sure everybody gets together. And that job almost always falls on one person in every group. And for me, I realized that in my family with Morgan, that person is me. Recently, we had the opportunity to travel around a lot of Europe, and as we were doing that, it became very evident that Morgan took 3 pictures and I took 300. But out of all of the pictures that I took, I actually want to show you the one that to me, I think might be the single most important photo I took, and it's this. And it's nothing that's like amazing. It's not like a tourist spot. It's a little spot in Italy. But what I want to point out are the 2 people that you'll see on the left side of the screen. The person facing us is my wife, Morgan, and the gentleman that she's talking to was our first exchange student. Her name was Miriam. It was her dad. And what made this such an interesting photo to me is that they were carrying on a conversation, except Morgan only speaks English, and her dad only speaks Italian. Now, granted, because he's from Europe, he speaks better English than most of us speak any other language, but they were talking and they were communicating and they were kind of seeing where different things were. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that before, right? Where you're in a space where it just seems like everyone else is speaking a different language than you. Maybe it was the first time at a new job and everyone at that job was using all of these abbreviations. And you're like, none of this makes sense yet. Or maybe it was the first time you came to a particular church and the pastor was up there talking about all these highfalutin things and they were go to this and that. And you were like, or maybe you've been fortunate enough that it happened one time when you were traveling and you were walking down the street and there was this street vendor that was selling food that you didn't exactly know what it was. And so you kind of pointed at it. And even though you couldn't speak the same language as the vendor, you ended up with something. And it was the most delicious thing you've ever put in your mouth, and you've tried to recreate it and just can't. But the reality is that we often find ourselves in spaces where we don't speak the same language as those around us anymore. Some of that is because of the algorithm, the fact that your TikTok algorithm or your Instagram or your Facebook or whatever it is shows you different things than it shows me. And it's actually into that space that we're doing the series that we're going to be doing over the next 4 weeks for that specific reason. We're going to be doing a series over the next 4 weeks called Streaming. And basically the reason for it is this. While there are so many different things that we often get exposed to that can create breakdowns in our communication, sometimes if you've ever had a show that you've been watching at the same time as someone else, it all of a sudden just creates a new space of dialogue. And so what we're going to be doing over the next 4 weeks is looking at 4 shows that people might have streamed recently or might have been looking at recently and showing maybe that these can create that mechanism, that bridge of communication. Today, we're going to be looking at the newest of the 4 shows. It's a show that actually just streamed at the end of last year. It's a show called Pluribus. And if you haven't seen it yet, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil it for you other than just a very high level, here's what the show is about. But basically, this show is created by Vince Gilligan, the person who wrote and directed Breaking Bad, and it traces the story of a lady by the name of Carol Sturka, who is from Albuquerque, at a time that there is some sort of a alien invasion or a virus. We're not exactly sure when you first start watching the show, and I don't want to spoil it. But basically, this thing infects everyone on Earth except for Carol and a dozen other people. And all of the other people, all of the other 6 billion people on Earth, they decide that they have one mission, and that is to try to convert the 12 or 13 people who have not yet been infected. But the way that they want to go about doing this is very unique. And that is that they want to try to make those 12 or 13 people as happy as possible. It's actually the reason that one of the slogans for the show was the most miserable person on earth must save the world from happiness. And one of the oddities about the show is that everyone, other than Carol and her small number of other people who have not been infected, they share a hive mind. And so they all have the exact same memories. They can just kind of telepathically communicate with each other. And they all know the same information. They all speak the same languages. So it doesn't matter if you're speaking to your neighbor, or if you're speaking to a baker in Bangladesh, or if you were speaking to the leader of North Korea, or the author Stephen King. They would all have the exact same information. To set things up today, I want to show you just a short clip of this show, and to give you kind of the background on it before I show it to you. It's basically in the scene that Carol is visiting one of the people who has been joined, one of the people in the hive mind. It's a lady by the name of Zosia, and she is in the hospital because Carol, in trying to figure out how far she could push the hive mind to do things to make her happy, asked for a hand grenade, and they gave her one. And so Zosia is in the hospital, and Carol is trying to figure out, okay, it would make me really happy if you would tell me how to disinfect everyone. And it's into that scene that Zosia explains to her why she can't do that. Now, I do want to mention before I show this scene that they do talk about a gay conversion therapy camp. Here at the Vineyards, we are very against that, but I do understand that that is a tool of oppression that has been used for some people, so if that is triggering for you or if that's going to be problematic for you to hear mention of, I just want to mention that so that you can take necessary precautions. But I'd like you to take just a second and watch this scene.
Soon enough, you'll understand everything. And you will feel so much better.
Freedom Falls. You know what that means, don't you? Of course you do. You know everything. Tell me about it. Tell me about Camp Freedom Falls.
You were 16, beginning to understand yourself, and your mother, she sent...
Yeah, go on. What'd she do?
She sent you to a conversion therapy camp in Covington, Tennessee, Camp Freedom Falls. You never forgave her.
Oh.
It was a terrible experience for you. The counselors there
Some of the worst people I have ever known. And they smiled all the time, just like you.
We're sorry, Carol. As for us, we love and accept all beings equally.
Oh, okay. If you're so accepting, then what about what you're trying to do to me now? Make me just like you, even though you know I do not want that.
You want to change us too, don't you? Didn't you just ask if it's possible? There is something else to consider. We know what it feels like to be you. To be alone, to suffer. We've been you. But you've never been us.
Now, I don't know if you have ever been in that kind of a situation before. Probably not, where there's a hive mind infected of the rest of humanity. But in some ways, I think there are ways that I sometimes feel like Carol, the blonde, in this situation. Sometimes it feels to me like everyone around me is really, really happy about something. And I'm not. I'm like, oh, I don't understand. And no matter how much they try to explain it to me, they might as well be speaking Italian because I don't understand what it is that they're saying. 174 years ago today, there was a very famous speech that also gave idea to the same thought. On July 5th, 1852, Frederick Douglass was giving a speech in Rochester, New York. And he said this line that I think is so important to kind of give voice to what he said in a speech that became known as "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." And in that speech, he said this: "Your high independence reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me, this 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, but I must mourn. And I think this concept that there are times that somebody rejoices while someone else mourns, even about the same situation, is one that most of us will wrestle with at some point in our lives. For example, for some people, the 4th of July just magnifies this. For other people, it's something that's way more personal. For some people, there's a lot of joy that came last week when Philip retired, and now he gets to go do the things that he spent his career building up to be able to do. And for others of us, we mourn that. For others, it's something like a change of a job where you're excited about the new opportunities, but you're going to miss your friends at your old job. Or for others, it's something kind of silly, like when your team wins a World Cup game, like Morocco did yesterday. I'm very excited about that. Or when your favorite television show gets canceled and all your friends are excited because you'll finally stop talking about it. Yeah, that hits. But the question is, when that happens, what do we do with it? What do we do with that when that happens? When this thing that brings everyone else joy isn't doing it for us? Well, today, maybe the next 20 or 25 minutes, what I'd like to do is wrestle with that question with you. And not to give you an answer for it, by the way, but rather to give us a framework for it. Because that's gonna happen to all of us, where something maybe good happens to us that other people are sad about, or something good happens to someone else and it makes us sad, and we're trying to figure out how to work through that. So I wanna start off by this big framework that I think is gonna be really helpful, and that's this: that genuine community is not built on shared happiness. It's built on a shared capacity to tell the truth about where we actually are. So I want us to sit in that for a second, and I want to say it again because I think it's important. Genuine community is not built on shared happiness. It's built on a shared capacity to tell the truth about where we actually are. I think there's a reason that we might need a new framework for this, and that's because so many of us grew up in a space where this is not what we were told. We were told that if you wanted to belong, you had to believe exactly what everyone else believes. Here in Springfield, literally, the ground of culture that we walk around in is based around this idea. When I was a little kid, the big 4th of July party was called Firefall, and it was done by the city. And then it was changed because a large church in the area started having a different fireworks festival called the I Love America Festival. And although that festival ended up stopping in 2011, I actually want to show you a couple of pictures from that I Love America Festival. Take a look at these pictures. You see I Love America, people eating and having a good time with families, a T-Rex, because nothing says 4th of July like a dinosaur. But I think for many of us, when we look at this, when we think about this, this is the culture that we live in, a culture that so often mixed faith and patriotism, and that told us that how we interact with community is that we start from a place that says we all love the same thing. We are all saying we all believe the same thing. And the problem with that, at least for me, may not be a problem for you, and that's okay. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is that when you start from the place that we all have to agree, there's not much space for debate. So what happens when all of a sudden you have a slightly different opinion? Or what happens when you express a difference? I just don't understand why we're doing this. What happens to that space? And for me, and it may be this way for you too, that it became a reason that when we realized that there was some difference, it was hard to stay in the community where we were. Because we started believing that we had to have the same experience as everyone else in order to have community at all. In the Bible, there's this wild story where this happens as well. It's in the Christian Old Testament, or what's called the Hebrew Scriptures. It shows up in the book of 1 Kings, chapters 18 and 19. And it's this story about this prophet by the name of Elijah. And when we think about prophets in the Bible, we're not talking about someone who has like a crystal ball who can like see the future. What we're talking about is someone who speaks truth about what's happening right then. They're kind of the spokesperson for God. And what was happening at this time is that Israel and a bunch of the other countries around Israel were having this, my God is bigger than your God fight. The same way today that we might be like, my country is better than your country, or my flag is better than your flag, kind of thing. We were having that debate. And into that space, Elijah basically tells the people of Israel, look, you've got to make a decision. You've got to stay on one side or the other. Either you serve the God of Israel, Yahweh, or you serve Baal. You've got to make a decision. And their response at first was not what he was hoping for. I want you to see what it says that they did in 1 Kings 18:21. It says this. It says that the people did not answer him a word. And so here's this guy. He's the prophet of God. He's the spokesperson for God. And he says, you need to figure out which side you're on. And they're like, no, I'm good. I don't need to make a decision yet. And so Elijah gets upset. And the story says that he basically looks at the prophets of Baal, this other god, and he says, look, we need to figure out which God is actually better. And so they have one of the very first firework shows of all time. Basically, they create these altars, these things out of stone, they put an animal on top, and Elijah says to the prophets of Baal, look, like, you call down fire from your God, I'll call down fire from my God, whichever one actually burns the altar wins, let's go. And the prophets of Baal try and nothing happens, and the story in the Hebrew text says that Elijah prayed and that Yahweh sent fire from sky, and it just eviscerated the altar. And when I was growing up, that was the Sunday school story. That's what I heard. And that's a great story, by the way. Yeah. Like God is good and like God answers our prayers and God hears us. And I'm very thankful for that story that I grew up with. But that's not where the story ended. In fact, in the very next verse, it says that Elijah looked at the Hebrew people and said, look, our God's obviously better, go kill them. And they did. I hate that verse is there. It's one of the reasons I think so many people get frustrated. They're like, why is this God of the Old Testament like this murder? That doesn't seem like Jesus. That doesn't seem like the divine love that I understand. Why? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know why it's there either. It doesn't make sense to me, except that it maybe tells us a human condition that so many of us are facing, which is that sometimes when the winds are at our back, everyone's willing to join our team. When we've got momentum, everyone's like, I want to be on your side. You're winning. I obviously want to be there. So the people who were around Elijah, who were quiet when he said, you've got to make a decision, whenever he showed himself as a victor, they all joined his side. And that's actually the first thing I want to share with you today, and that's this, that many of us find ourselves trying to build community around shared experiences. But those are often short-term, right? Many of us find ourselves trying to build community around shared experiences, but those are often short-term. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with short-term friendships, right? There's nothing wrong with situationships or deal friends, if you would. The friends who aren't your real friends, they're just there for a season. You know, your roommate from college who you haven't talked to in 20 years. It's okay. They were an important part of your life at that stage. That friend that you met at summer camp in 8th grade, and you're like, we're going to be best friends forever. And then by 9th grade, you never texted them again, right? It's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that for many of us, that became the model of what all friendships look like. Oh, we all have this one thing that we all believe in exactly the same way, so now we can be friends. It kind of reminds me of this Far Side cartoon, actually. It looks like this, that a couple of guys are sitting on a deserted island. He says, thanks for being my friend, Wayne. Well, I don't think there was much choice. And for Elijah, the same thing happened. The people who were his friends when everything was going well just became short-term friends. Because while they were all in with him when the winds blew at his back, whenever Yahweh showed up and whenever the altar was burned, as soon as things started escalating, and as soon as the government of the prophets of Baal, they started understanding what had happened, and they were like, all right, you killed our prophets, so we're going to kill you. I want you to see what happened. Chapter 19 says that those in power heard this and sent a message to Elijah that he was going to be killed. And it said, then he was afraid, Elijah was afraid, and he got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. And he asked that he might die. It's enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors. You know, I know that many of us might have felt ourselves in a spot similar. Not exactly the same here. You know, maybe it was the thing that you're like, oh, I'm doing really well. I'm the photographer of my family. And yet I did not get an invite to Travis and Taylor's wedding to be their photographer. Shocking. But when things are going well, people have our backs. And then suddenly the wind goes the other direction and it seems like we're all alone. It was really easy a couple of years ago to see schools all around who were having gold and red days, right? Everyone had the little Patrick Mahomes hair. They were winning. They were in Super Bowls. Taylor Swift was on every Sunday night commercial. But then they start losing. They don't make the playoffs, and suddenly there are no more red and yellow days at schools. And in those times, it can lead to some pretty severe mental health spaces for us. In the story, Elijah just looks up at God and is like, God, I should just die. I'm no better than anyone else. And I just want to say this very clearly, that when things get rough, it is okay to not be okay. And sometimes we need to read these stories and say, like, I can find myself in the story of Elijah here. I can find myself saying, like, it doesn't feel okay. And I just want to say this, that if you are in a space where that's happening, probably the most visited site that we have on thevenues.org is our counseling page. There's a QR code to it up on the screen. And here's the thing about it. We think that counseling is really, really important. Your mental health is really, really important. You wouldn't just let an arm be broken without getting it fixed. If you're having mental health issues, please go see a therapist. And that is not me. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. And while I can help you maybe answer some spiritual questions, or I can answer some questions about the Bible, this is not my realm. But every single person who is on our thevenues.org/counseling page has been vetted. There are people who we trust. There are people who we have talked to. There are people who are going to affirm you, who have been trained in specific areas. And by the way, take a huge wide variety of different payment schemes. So you can find someone who's going to fit your needs and be able to take care of you in the way that you need. It's interesting to me, by the way, in this story of Elijah, that after Elijah just sits down next to this broom tree and is like, I should just die, that it says an angel comes to him and says, okay, well, why don't you take a nap and eat some food? Which, by the way, is oftentimes what my therapist says to me when I say things like, man, I'm just really struggling. He said, have you exercised lately? Have you been sleeping okay? Have you been eating like you need to be? Not that that's enough for it always, but sometimes it's just a good reminder to take care of ourselves. But the Bible says that then God shows up. So after this angel shows up and says, why don't you sleep and eat? It says this, that the word of the Lord came to Elijah saying, what are you doing here, Elijah? And I actually think out of all of the verses that I never heard in this story, this one might be the most important to me. Because while you might have grown up in Sunday school hearing the story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal like I did, I never ever heard this verse. The word of the Lord came to him saying, what are you doing here, Elijah? Basically, God just looks at Elijah and says, what are you doing here? And I wonder what would happen to us if the divine, if love, if Jesus, if God just looked at us sometimes and just said, what are you doing here? What's going on? What are you doing here? I think it's a question that would help so many people in our country right now. If they were just asked honestly to respond to, what are you doing here right now? Just a couple of weeks ago, the Southern Baptist Convention that I was raised in voted to say that women couldn't be pastors. People who look like me, who sound like me, who have beards like me, raised their hands, their beard isn't at school, raised their hand and said, I don't think women should be pastors. And I wonder if they would have said the same thing if God would have looked at them and said, what are you doing here? When the Bible or religion or faith gets used as a way to discriminate against our queer friends, or gets used to discriminate on basis of race, or gets used to discriminate against people based on socioeconomic status, or gets used against a whole slew of other things. I wish that they would just think to themselves, what am I doing here? Is this really the path of love? Not to throw stones, by the way. I think there are times that we need to do this. I think there are times that I need to ask, what am I doing here? And I'll be honest with you, I think most churches should ask this question. Because if the answer of what are we doing here is just, I had nothing else to do on a Sunday morning, I think we can find an equally good answer, right? Recover from a sunburn, go to the lake. But when people ask me this question, what are you doing here? I want to tell you what I tell them. When people say, why do we still have church now that Philip's retired? Let me give you some really, really good answers. Number one, we help keep people alive through things like our safe parking program, our weekly meals for our unsheltered friends, and our cold weather shelters. There are thousands of people in Springfield right now who are alive because we come together and pool our money to make sure that those who are less fortunate have access to things. Yeah, thank you. There are kids and people who are going to have Christmas presents this December because things like our Lights of Love program, because we come together and we say, you know what, I've got enough, I can help out with other people. There are people who are going to be able to survive the winter or able to cool off in the summer, able to get a meal on a Thursday night or a Friday morning because we come together. Not because we need something to do, but because we earnestly believe that Springfield needs the venues. We also help people have a place where their hearts are healed and their doubts find voice. We know that too many people have been excluded from faith communities because they believe something differently. They didn't already believe the exact same things, and they were just told, like, you can just leave. They were told that they should leave because of who they love, or because of the color of their skin, or because they didn't have the right outfit on, or whatever. And we want to be a place where people can find healing because we want to be a people that imagines a world driven by love. A world where people's lives are transformed by asking, what are you doing here? And answering that. We're keeping people alive and we're giving people hope. And that's actually the final handhold that I want to kind of give us today, and that's this. That real community happens when we allow everyone to be who they truly are, right? Like, real community happens when we allow everyone to be who they truly are. One of the worst feelings about being alone is when you feel like you're doing everything right and you're still alone. In Pluribus, Carol can't understand why everyone else isn't trying to get the infection cured. And when those in the hive mind remind her that everything is peaceful now, that they don't have to lock their doors because they all share the same memories, she gets frustrated because she reminds them that they don't have autonomy. She feels like she's fighting the good fight. She thinks she's doing what's right. And I want to just kind of make an aside here and say this. Most people are trying their hardest to do what they think is best. It's part of our belief here at the venues that people are intrinsically good, by the way. Most people are trying their hardest to do what they think is best. They're waking up every morning thinking, what can I do to make the world around me a better place for my family and my kids? And I think when we start understanding that, we start treating people differently. It just might be that their best doesn't align with what is our best or in our best interest. In the classic Simpsons episode, Last Exit to Springfield, this exact same thing shows up. Mr. Burns is trying to cut the plant's dental coverage because he's trying to save money. He's trying to do what he thinks is in his best interest. And the way he tries to convince them of this is just, okay, we'll cut dental coverage, but the way we'll make it up is that during every staff meeting, I'll buy a keg of beer. And one would think that Homer would be all over this, except he realizes that Lisa needs braces. And so suddenly he starts fighting against having beer at staff meeting because he realizes that he needs to have the dental coverage because what is best for everyone is for things not to get cut. Elijah faces the same dynamic in the story. He thinks he's doing what's best, while the people around him aren't sure. Remember, he was surrounded by people who were willing to kill for him just before. He was tired of the fair weather friends. And so when God asks him what he's doing, I want you to see what he says. He says, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. The Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. And I'll be honest, as a kid who grew up, as the youth group hero kid, this resonates with me. I sometimes couldn't realize why my high school friends weren't as excited about what was happening in my church as I was. And when I'd be alone on a Friday night, I'd be like, God, don't you see I'm doing the thing? But God's response here isn't what I want it to be. You see, in my mind, Elijah is always the superhero of the story. He's the one wearing the Christian t-shirt who shows up at all the rallies. But God doesn't say good job when he said he's being zealous. Instead, the Bible says that God fired him. Dr. Will Gaffney, an Episcopal priest, noted it this way, that Elijah was essentially unchanged by this incredible encounter with God. And so God fired him. I wonder how often we get alone and we are unchanged, but the story doesn't end there. God tells Elijah, you need to go find your replacement. And so it says, you should anoint Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Meloha, as a prophet in your place. I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. You see, Elijah thought he was alone. He believed that those who were the loudest or the quietest, those who were his fair weather friends, were the only ones who mattered. Those who didn't act when he said what he wanted to do, and those who did act when the wind blew his way. But I think there's something interesting that happens here when Elijah gets away from the noise. When Elijah is sitting underneath the tree and God says, what are you doing here? And that is that he has a moment to reflect. He is told and reminded that he's never alone. Richard Rohr, who is a theologian that we quote a lot here, helped me understand this by noting that loneliness is a place where sometimes we get connected to the divine in a unique way because it helps us see that we're not actually alone. He, by the way, doesn't think that when we are self-absorbed that it's a selfishness piece. Often we're just busy. But he said it this way, and I think it's really good, that most of us are totally identified with our own passing thoughts. Proper distance from ourselves would allow us to see our radical connectedness with everything else. And such radical connectedness is holiness itself. In other words, sometimes the reasons that we have a hard time connecting to people is because we don't know who we are. So this morning, maybe the divine can ask you, what are you doing here? And gives us some chance to think about who we actually are. Because Rohr's idea here, that we just need some kind of a contemplative look, is the exact same thing that Carol needed in Pluribus, that Elijah needed in the Hebrew scripture. But what God said to him instead is that there were 7,000 people. They just weren't the loud ones. They were there with you the whole time. Dr. Dan Eptison, who's an Old Testament professor, finishes this up today, and he says this: God highlights the existence of 7,000 Israelites to emphasize the substantial size of the nucleus of God's faithful community. Elijah need not take himself so seriously because he is far from being the only person committed to the divine cause. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something that we need to think about as we close this morning, and that's this. That maybe the reason that we need church, the reason that we need the venues, not just that Springfield needs the venues, but that I need the venues, is because I need to look around and remind myself that I'm not alone. Sometimes I need to look you in the eyeball and be like, we're on the same team. We're moving the same direction. We're doing the same thing. We're making sure people don't starve to death. We're making sure that people aren't lonely. We're making sure that people have community. I need to be reminded of that. Look, we know here at the venues, right now there are all kinds of complicated feelings. And so this morning, I want to give specific voice to one of those. One of the areas about the conversation lately was last week we had an awesome celebration for Philip's 70th birthday and his retirement. I am over the moon happy for him. He turned 70 and he chose to retire so he can spend time writing and traveling and posting on Facebook all the time. I'm really thankful you're doing that, by the way, Philip. He gets to see what life looks like when he gets to do what he wants to do. And honestly, I hope he sleeps in today. He's earned it. And at the same time, I know that some of us, it makes us sad, right? I get to spend the last 3 years hanging out with him every week. He was more than just my pastor. He was my friend. He was my mentor. I got to see him in all kinds of different ways and learn so much about him. So I guess this is where I'm going to end it. I don't know. If genuine community is built on a shared capacity to tell the truth, that's my truth, but it may not be the same place that you are. And so sharing truth isn't just me saying words and you listening, it's also me listening. Here's what I'd like to offer. Because I just need to listen to you to help build the community that we need here at the venues, because I believe Springfield needs the venues. Up on the screen, there's 2 ways that you can get in contact with me. And I want to be very clear about this. The first way is this. Just go to thevenues.org/coffee. The QR code there will take you directly to that. I would love to buy you a cup of coffee or an adult beverage and just hear where you are in life. And I mean that. Find a time that works for you. We'll make it happen. Or you can text me. I would say call me, but with so many spam calls, I don't answer unless I know who it is. So here's my number, 417-597-4136. You can text me anytime. Because I truly believe that the way that we move forward to make sure that Springfield has the venues is that we work together, that we share our community together, okay? Because I'm here for you just like you're here for me, because when I look at you, I know that I'm not alone. And I want to not be alone together, all right? With that said, you would have noticed maybe a few times during the service that there was a Q&A number that popped up. If you had any questions during the service, you could have texted that number in, 417-413-1611. And we have about a minute. I'm actually going to have Kurt Curtis, who is one of our volunteers here, come up. And if there are any questions, Kurt, which there may or may not be, are there any questions this morning, sir?
Not this morning.
Then I did a great job, right?
Is this working?
You can, here, Beards can share a mic.
No, there's no questions this morning.
Okay, well, here's the thing. If you have questions, here's what I'll tell you I'll do, is that I will read through any questions that you might have about the teaching today, and I will respond to it by tomorrow. Is that fair? And if that is our segue to like jump into having a deeper conversation, then that's awesome. And if it's just that you want to go get a coffee or a beverage, just text me directly or go to thevenues.org/coffee. Is that fair? All right, awesome. Well, with that said, thank you, Kurt, for coming up here. With that said, let me give you some instructions on how we're going to get out of here today and how we're going to move forward, and that's this. Today we have 2 things that I want to kind of draw your attention to as you walk out in the lobby. The first of which is that there is a table for connection groups. If you want to find other connection groups, other people who are doing the same thing, who are moving in the same direction, there's a table right in the middle of the lobby. It's a circular table. Just stop there and tell Josh, who's going to be at the table, that you would like to have some information about a connection group. Or there's also a space with dinners for 8 there as well. So you can stop by either one of those and just jump into that space. With that said, if you have kids who are down in family venues, we want to go and give you the opportunity to get out of here first. So if you'll head out the doors and head to your left, thank you so much. I know that your kids had a really great time today exploring the concept of what it means to personally be happy in their space. So if you want to head out the doors and head to your left, you can go pick up your kids. And I'm sure that they had a really great time down in family venues. With that said, if you are joining us online, thank you so much for joining us online. We are so thankful for you, and we will see you next week online. And for everyone else, if today is